Alright, so this Knife Thoughts video is going to be a full review of this knife, and this is the WE Knives Banter, designed by Ben Petersen, known as Ben Banters on Instagram, and known for his work with CRKT and BladeHQ. So real quick, let's take a look at the knife first, and then I'll talk about how I came to do this review. First of all, it comes in this zippered pouch, and has a little cleaning cloth, and here's the knife. Now it doesn't come with that lanyard. I added the lanyard, but if you want to check out my article on this knife, my full review in article form, definitely go to my website, knifethoughts.com. The article will go over maybe a little bit more detail, include more pictures and things like that, as well as links to buy this knife and also for more background info on Ben Petersen, the designer. But first in this video, I want to talk about how I came to review this knife. So early this year, I was browsing the R Knife Club subreddit on Reddit and saw this picture posted as kind of a promo preview of the WE Banter. And based on this, I wasn't a huge fan of the design, and being a little overly negative in my initial comment, said something like, "I know I'll get downvoted for this, but I think that looks like a terrible design." And it turned out that Ben Petersen was following the thread and replied really graciously, saying that he appreciated the feedback. So I took that as kind of an opportunity to take a step back and give a more full and balanced overview of my thoughts based on that picture. And if you would like to see, kind of the details of what I had to say initially in this, what you might call a visual review, you can pause and scroll through. But basically, I just thought it had some design issues, both aesthetic and practical. And Ben replied that he would like to send me the real one if I was able to review it in such detail based on a picture. He'd like to send me the real thing so that I could review it in earnest. And so that's how I came about the opportunity to review this knife. So now let's talk about the knife itself. Well, first off, it is a really great culmination of all of the things that Ben does like in a knife. He often talks about liking a lighter knife, and this knife is G10 handles with kind of nested minimalist liners. It's tough to see in there with the black background. See if it will. There we go. You can kind of see those liners in there. So they're both minimalist in the sense that they're not necessarily full liners, and they are nested. So it's a lightweight knife, and he also has mentioned that he just likes G10 handles, which is what this is. He talks often about liking pocket clips in general, but also deep carry pocket clips, and you can see this pocket clip, when you put this in your pocket, pretty much none of the knife is showing. So definitely a nice deep carry pocket clip. You might even think that it was a pen if not for this etch. If you're a knife enthusiast and you see that, you'll know what it is. But it does kind of look like a pen clip. So it has that. Then another thing he talks about is being able to choke up on the knife and get your finger to the tip. And that can be really useful for fine cutting, especially cutting paper and things like that. Just those kind of small cutting tasks where you need a lot of control. And that's something that's also actually good, kind of a little bit different of a use for things like skinning and stuff like that, outdoor stuff. So definitely passes that test. You can get pretty much all the way to the tip there and still have your middle finger up at the guard. So that tells you that this is not a large knife. It is about 3-inch blade, just under 3-inch blade, and it's about 2.9 ounces, and it is about an inch tall in this direction and a little under half an inch thick in width. The blade is 0.1 inches thick, so a small knife for sure, but it fits all of those characteristics that he likes, that he's said that he likes in his videos. So I think he did a really good job, making a knife based on his preferences. So now let's take a step and say, well, what about me? What have I kind of come to as for a conclusion on this knife now that I've gotten to see it in person, kind of considering what I had to say about it online? Well, one of the first things I said was that it looks squat, or like it's not a nice design. And interestingly, I mentioned in that comment that it looked like different pictures gave it a different look, and that's definitely the case. In person, this knife looks much less squat, I guess I would say, or blocky, than it did in that initial picture that I saw. I think that it looks relatively good design aesthetic-wise with the handle and the blade together. So it's an interesting, I think it was just the picture on that. And then another thing that I mentioned was this straight back. Now, I still am not 100% convinced that it's the best, like, maybe look. It doesn't have kind of maybe as much of a sleek look as if there was a little bit more curvature to the back or the top of the knife here. But it has no, it's not terrible looking like I kind of maybe alluded to. It looks fine, and it doesn't have an upward cant of the blade. Like, again, one of the things that I mentioned, the blade is straight out of the handle there, as you can see. So those are two things that aren't as bad in person for sure. Another thing is I really thought that it would be too small for my hand, despite, again, mentioning that this was a good addition, this cutoff. It's not. I've used this knife a lot since getting it, and it feels pretty good in the hand. The cutoff is a huge help. It's really was a good design choice to put that there. If not, if it had a, was shaped like the guard, it would be uncomfortable. But because it has that cutoff, it is comfortable for me. I can get a good solid grip and use it well, and there really aren't any hot spots. And I did use this for some carving and whittling and all kinds of things like that. So in person, the grip is comfortable. I've really had no issues with the grip, and the G10 is pretty normal G10. If you are familiar with WE knives, it's pretty much exactly like their G10. Not super grippy, not smooth, kind of right in between. So the handle feels better than I expected, and it's one of those things where you really can't know how a handle is going to feel until you get it and you hold the knife, unless it's something crazy like a shark-shaped handle or some mermaid-shaped handle like they sometimes show on in Ben's videos and things like that. But I was pleasantly surprised by this handle. Now, with that said, I showed this to a couple people, and I did have more than one person say that it looked blocky. So even though it feels better in hand than I expected, and I think also overall looks better, the handle does still look a little blocky. And I think one thing is that this hard chamfering around the edges, this kind of large chamfer line, gives it almost an industrial type look. But the industrial look, it can kind of go back and forth between a negative industrial and kind of a cool minimalist. So it's one of those things where I think it's preference, and again, I think it looks better in person than in pictures. So it's still not your typical design. It's not something that's this is what I would call maybe an Art Deco type or a little bit industrial design, and I think this is more so. So it's not your typical kind of curved designs that you see on a lot of knives like that. But I do think it is better in person. Now, as for in use, I really like this knife actually. I used it for a bunch of different things, like I said, cutting cardboard, cutting food, fishing, all kinds of stuff like that, and it worked really well. It has the blade shape, which is a pretty classic spear point. Now, in the picture, it looked like this section right here was really straight. So like from the belly to the tip was really straight. It's not in person, and that's something that I really appreciate. I find blade shapes like that, where it's straight, to be a little bit more difficult to sharpen, because you kind of have to change, you can't just keep the same angle, you kind of have to change the angle while you're sharpening. And so it was nice that it's not like that in person. It worked well for all kinds of different cutting, and it seems to be ground thin. It again is a 0.1 inch thick blade stock, and it seems to be ground thin, but because it does have this saber grind, the tip is, let's see if it'll focus, the tip is relatively sturdy, so when I did use this for some whittling and carving, it didn't feel at all like the tip was going to break. So in use, I was really happy with it. It's really easy to open and close. These thumb studs do sit a little close to the handle, but they're easy to get at. This is, I find, I just push it straight up and it opens really easily. And then you can, I don't know if I can do it with my left hand, but you can also, maybe, I blocked it with my finger there. You can definitely also middle finger flick it. And that's because it has a really well-tuned detent, and it also has cage ball bearing pivots. Again, let's see if it'll focus. You can see in there, cage ball bearing pivots, and generally a nicely tuned pivot. So really smooth, and you can see this is kind of an interesting thing. I don't know if this is purposeful, but for me, when I unlock it, it's definitely drop closed, and then rather than having to push it with a thumb stud or something, this kind of area here where it hits the blade stop or stop pin, you can just push that closed. So I don't know if that's purposeful, but it's an interesting little feature. You can see, you can almost front flip this. Now, Ben has mentioned that he doesn't like front flippers, and I'm not a fan of front flippers. It certainly isn't designed to do that, but it's interesting that because of this, you can at least close it almost like a front flipper. So easy to open and close. Now, I did find that if I had my phone, sometimes I have to carry another phone for work also, and keys and stuff like that in my pockets, that because the clip does carry so deeply, I kind of had to reach my hand down in amongst other stuff to get it. And so I added this lanyard, and it definitely helped in retrieving the knife out of the pocket. But also I think that the blue lanyard goes well with this. I wonder if it would be something that could be done, and if it would look good to have blue hardware. Maybe not necessarily the clip, but just the screws. But I think the blue lanyard looks good with the blue thumb stud. So pretty easy to use, easy to get in and out of the pocket, easy to open and close, and the blade shape worked really well for pretty much all the uses that I did. And it is made well, came perfectly centered. I haven't taken it apart. I was thinking about taking it apart just like to look at the insides, but seems unnecessary. I don't really take knives apart unless I have to, and I didn't have to. I wish this would focus better, but you can see that it's well centered there. And it has a nice construction in the sense that it's kind of these post construction, so you could clean it out really easily. And I did have to clean it out after fishing, and it did clean out really easily. So I really like how it's made. It's made well. I like this blackout version. There's also a blue version, but the blackout version is nice looking with the Wii logo on the pivot, and then see if I can even get it. There we go. The S35VN etch and the "What is up, guys," which is how Ben always started his videos. So nice looking knife. Worked well in all my uses, and although I don't prefer smaller knives, and I don't think that this knife has converted me, I think that it's helping me to see that I might not need as much knife as I prefer. So I'm going to give you some comparisons here. You already saw some of them. This is the Native 5, and you can see the Native 5 is a really classic EDC knife. You can see the Native 5 is a larger knife. It has about the same edge actually, but it's a slightly larger knife. You get more grip on the Native 5. And I really have always liked using that knife. Here's a Kershaw Injection 3. A little bit more edge on that one and longer on the handle. And when I had the 3.5, the larger version of this, and I liked it a lot. Ended up getting this because it was on sale. I was surprised at how much I liked it for how small it was. And this knife is even smaller. So interesting to see that I'm liking a knife this small. And then a couple traditional comparisons. Here's a gradation cutlery number 15 and a case full-size trapper. So basically I was surprised by how much I did like this knife and how useful it was, how I really didn't have any kind of cutting task that I felt like I needed more knife, other than maybe food prep, which really, you should use kitchen knives for that. So I've really enjoyed getting to use this knife, test it out, and I'm happy to do this review and give some feedback to Ben and get it in front of you guys so you can see it and decide whether you'd like to get it. I think that it's a good value at the price. The price point is a little lower than what he had initially announced or I think thought it was going to be. Instead of $120, it's about $109. And I think that that's a good price. S35 VN steel, G10 handles, ball bearing pivot, and really well made, and a new designer too. So there's kind of a story behind it. So I think it's a good value at that price. And if you really like smaller knives under 3-inch blades, or you have to carry under 3-inch blades because of the laws in your area, this is a great option. But one thing I wanted to kind of recommend is there's a trend in the knife industry of small and large versions. So a couple really well-known examples are the Spyderco Endura 4, the Benchmade Griptilian, and, sorry for the shaking here, the Ontario Rat 1. And if you're watching this video, you're probably familiar with all those knives, and you're probably familiar with the fact that there are smaller versions. So there's the Delica 4, the Mini Griptilian, and the Ontario Rat 2. I don't have any of those knives because generally I prefer the larger versions. But one thing that I kind of wanted to suggest to Ben, and depending on I guess the success of this knife, which I think I get the feeling that this knife is going to be a big success, and I hope it is, so that it can facilitate more designs from Ben in general, but also I'd love to see this kind of duo happen, where instead of just having this small, approximately 3-inch bladed version of the Ben Banter, or the Wee Banter, that Ben could design a larger version. So a approximately 3.5 to 4-inch bladed version, maybe 3.75 inch, that would fit in with this kind of trend of a smaller and larger. And I think that it would be really easy to do and would make for a really great knife. All you'd have to do really is add about an inch to the blade and handle. Now I know it's not that simple in CAD and 3D drawings and stuff like that, but design wise I think that you could basically just lengthen the knife but keep the same design, and it would look really good and work really well, and still fit the kind of design parameters, and it would be really comfortable in the hand, because then you wouldn't even need this cutoff here at the end. You could just get a full grip and you would get a little bit more usable edge. So I think that would be a great thing to bring to market. I think that there are a lot of people like me who prefer knives in that 3.5-inch to 4-inch blade range, even if maybe, as this knife has helped to show me, I don't necessarily need all of that blade length. But that's something that I would love to see Ben design, that larger version, and maybe call it the Wee Repartee. Like a longer version of Banter. So I thought of that while I was writing the article for my website and thought it was pretty funny. It would be pretty fitting. So just my suggestion, I'd love to see a larger version, even though I have really enjoyed this version. And again, I want to really thank Ben for sending this along with the mat, which was in the package, as well as a t-shirt and his poster. You can find all of those at his website, which I'll put links to in the description. And I think it's, again, a really cool thing that he could see my criticism of his design, something that's probably very personal to him, design that he's put a lot of work into, and not take it negatively, not take it personally, but take it as an opportunity to get real feedback and constructive criticism. And I think that shows an authenticity, maybe a confidence in his work that I really appreciate. And again, I appreciate him sending along the knife. So if you've enjoyed this video, again, one more time, please do check out the full review on my website, and check out my social media, all at Knife Thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe here, like the video, and hit the bell for notifications. And as always, don't forget to go out and do good.